Hey guys, my name is Terry Kinnett and wanted to just take a minute to share a little bit of my testimony with you. Wanted to just encourage those who may watch this, just to encourage you that no matter what has gone on in your life, no matter where you're at, what you've done, no matter how bad your circumstances may or may not have been, I just want you to know that there is hope, and my story is testimony to that. I won't go into every little detail in this video, but I will make another one later with my whole story and let you kind of hear some of that. But I wanted to say this. As a child, my life was not an easy life. I had a lot of difficulties as a child, and some of those, well, most of those were not self-inflicted. They're the cards, so to speak, that I was dealt growing up. My mother, who tried to raise me and my two brothers, she dealt with many different issues. One that was probably most prevalent when I was a kid that I knew of was she struggled with schizophrenia, which is definitely a mental disorder, and so that caused her to go from different mental hospitals, and what that basically translated for me and my two younger brothers was that we moved around a lot. Now, before that, we were moving around a lot because this man in my life, who for about 5 or 6 years I thought was my father, had his last name. But through some circumstances, when I was about 5 or 6, I found out that this guy wasn't really my father. And to be honest, at the time, I wouldn't say that it necessarily devastated me. But I would say later on in life, I began to struggle mightily with that. But he was in the military, and so we traveled around a lot because of the military. But it was during that time that my mother came down with having a nervous breakdown or schizophrenia. And so through some just different events, my stepfather divorced her and started raising me and my two brothers. And things were difficult, things were different, and then a different dynamics was introduced to us, and he got remarried, and the lady that he remarried, or who he married, was an African American woman. She was really nice, always, had nothing against her, and she brought 4 kids into the relationship. And so I just want to help you see this picture. There were 7 boys in the house, and so what I began to see happen, 2 things. One, my stepfather, because he's trying to help raise 7 boys, there was just a period of time where there was abuse that was taking place. But at the time, I didn't think much about it, other than I knew that there was constant fear there. And so I also knew, having been in the military, that probably added to it. And then again, 7 boys might add a little bit to that as well. The other thing that was going on during that time period, this was in the 80s, is that biracial families were not a everyday occurrence. And so I can remember even going to school and dealing with some of the repercussions of that, and just kind of being made fun of and different things. So that was going on. And then there was one day, I was around 8 or 9, and I remember coming home from school and my stepdad telling me and my brothers that we were going to go live with my mother. And to be honest, I was quite excited, because in my mind I thought, well, she must be healthy, everything must be good, and it meant that I wouldn't get beat anymore. And so we left the state of California, where we had been living with him, and moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee. And once we got there, the situation was not as exciting as I had hoped. and the main reason for that is found out that the reason we had moved to Chattanooga with my mom is that she had cancer and was dying, and kind of her last request was that she would get to spend that with her sons. And so I also realized that not only is she dealing with cancer, her mental illness was not healed either. And so while we were technically with my mom, we spent a lot of time moving around, living with family members, spent some time in a local children's home as well. And so we kind of dealt with that. On top of that, we were extremely poor. And so that brought on a whole new set of difficulties and things. But that was, kind of starting to become the norm for us. And so then while my mom is struggling and going through all sorts of things, we had a landlord who was influential in trying to help my mother, and she would they would offer to take us to church. Even along the way through there was a church that also had a bus ministry that would come pick us up, take us to VBS, different things. And so while all that was going on, I was hearing about Jesus. And one of the things I remember about my mom, not that she always lived it, not that her life exemplified this, but one of the things that I remember her doing is telling me and my brothers about Jesus. And I can remember at times waking up and her having this big family Bible. I think most people call them coffee table Bibles, but I can remember her praying and having that open. And so I wasn't ignorant in the sense of I had never heard of Jesus, but I really didn't know who Jesus was. And so then at the age of 10, my mother dies, and I spent some time in a children's home and then a foster family. And to be honest, when my mom died, it was as if Jesus died. Now, he obviously died and rose again, and he wasn't dead. But in my life, practically speaking, he was. And what would happen is occasionally I would have friends invite me to church, or people invite me to come to this event at church. And so I would occasionally hear about it, but to be honest, I didn't know really what it meant. And to be completely honest, I actually kind of didn't really care for it too much, because my little bit of experience in church was negative. To be honest, I just I would see a lot of hypocrisy, and so it kind of was a turnoff, to be honest. And so it didn't really hit me then, and it wasn't until I was 18 years old that for the first time I really came to know Jesus. And here's kind of how that came to be. When I was 16, I moved out of my foster home, and I started living from house to house, living with friends. And while that sounds really cool, and to be honest, at the time it was, the problem with that is I was an orphan. And even though I was living with a lot of these different families, I still had too much freedom. I know that sounds weird. And so I made a lot of bad choices. And part of that was because I became so depressed. I had no hope in life. And everything that I would put my hope in, whether it was sports or relationships, just they all seemed to disappoint me. They all seemed to leave a void there. And so that kind of led me to making some decisions to do drugs and alcohol. And all that seemed to do is put more and more difficulties in my life. I mentioned when I was a kid, I didn't have control over the difficulties. But some of the difficulties that I started experiencing as a teenager were self-inflicted. Choices that I was making. Now, I could make excuses because of my circumstances and all that, but ultimately I was making bad choices. And there's a couple of things that happened that I believe God used leading up to how he basically finally took a hold of my life. The first thing was I had a friend who their church was doing this youth Sunday night, and I guess he had invited some people, and so I ended up being there. And when I heard his story, I didn't realize, to be honest, I didn't realize that he had changed. I just knew that there were some things different about him, but I didn't really know what that was about until that night. And then as I heard his story and heard about how Jesus changed his life, and how he was striving to be like Jesus, it really hit me. And to be honest, like, I didn't change, but there was something on the inside where it was as if something was tugging at me in my heart, but not enough to change me, but enough to get me thinking. And so that happened when I was a junior in high school, kind of maybe into junior year. I don't know exactly when, but that was about the time period. So we go through the summer, go into senior year, and to be honest, like, I was all about football. That was everything to me, and that's all I was focused on. And unfortunately, because I was so small then, and I know that's hard to believe if you're looking at me right now or if you know me, but I was really good at football, but I was small, and so just not a lot of interest. And because I didn't have that family support system at the time, to be honest, there was nobody pushing for me to go to a small school to play football. There was none of that. And so, to be honest, I gave up. I did. I truly gave up, and just started pouring my time and energy into drinking and doing drugs. And one night, and every time I tell the story, like, it's as if it just happened yesterday. I just remember it so boldly, or vividly, I should say. But this one night, we were doing what we normally do, and I was sitting there on a couch, and all of a sudden my heart started beating so hard that I felt like it was about to explode. And I remember crying out to some of the people that were there, and just telling them that I feel like I'm about to die. And they thought, oh, he's just tripping, he's fine, you're gonna be fine, don't worry about it. And I was not okay. And at that point, it's as if I'm just talking to you right now, but this time it was God talking to me. And he said TK, because that's what a lot of people, that's what I heard, that's what most people called me. So he was like, TK, you need to start living for me now, or you're gonna die. And to be honest, like, at that moment, I felt like I was in a movie scene. It was like I was seeing a flashback in my life of all these times that God had sent people into my life to tell me about his son Jesus. It was like I could remember all the coaches who invited me to do FCA stuff and be involved in Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I can remember all the times people were asking me to just come to church. Like, it was like I could see for that moment all these people, and what I think God was trying to show me then, because I remember very vividly, like, man, God really does love me. He really does care about me, and he's been caring about me, and somehow I was missing it. And so that night, as I passed out, the next morning when I woke up, I was a totally different person. Like, my life was changed. Now, I didn't become perfect. I still made a lot of bad choices over the next couple of years. But one thing that I was able to do immediately is I gave up the drugs and alcohol, and my heart began to be open to my sin. And as I would realize that things were sin, like, it was like a battle was going on where I was trying to keep from doing it because I knew it was a sin, but I've done it so long in my life that there was this ongoing struggle. But that night, man, my life was totally changed, and I began to look at life totally different. And you know what? I want to encourage each and every one of you, because I don't know where you're at in life. I don't know who's going to actually watch this video, but I want to encourage you that no matter what's going on in your life, it's never too late. There is always hope. To be honest, I never saw myself becoming anything. I had bought into this lie that I was a nobody, I was an orphan, and my life meant nothing. I had convinced myself of that. The 2 different occasions I tried to commit suicide because I thought nobody cares and this will be better, and if I was to die, who would even miss me? But what I realized on that day is that God loved me and He cared about me. And you know what? If you're like me and maybe you've made some bad choices and you've struggled, I just want you to know that God will forgive you. 1 John 1:9 says that if we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us. And so I just want to encourage you with that. I also want to say this. There's a story in Scripture. It's in Acts chapter 9. It's about a guy named Saul. And basically, we're not the same, but Saul was going one direction against what God wanted, and God intervened in his life, and he was blinded, and He sent a guy to him to talk to him, and God Himself spoke to him. And you know what? He was blinded, and then all of a sudden one day, because of this guy's faithfulness to God, He healed him, and in that moment, his life was changed, just like mine. And you know what? Your life can be changed as well. My life wasn't perfect after that. Saul's life was not perfect after that. But Saul went on to be what many would consider the most influential Christian in the New Testament. He wrote so many of the New Testament books, and he influenced so many different followers of Jesus. He became a missionary, and you know what? I hope that my life in the end will even somewhat remotely, like 10%, measure up to what Paul was able to do. And it may or may not. I mean, that's not for me to worry about. But what I do know is that the transformation that took place in Paul's life, Saul's life, man, it took place in mine, and it can take place in yours. And so I just want to encourage you, if that's you and you need some help, man, reach out to other brothers and sisters that you know of that are Christians or seem to be Christians. You can even reach out to me here on my YouTube channel. I would love to be able to just have conversations with you and help you. Again, thank you for your time. I want to say this last thing as encouragement. That was in 1995 is whenever that transformation happened, and there's been no looking back. God has now blessed me with 3 kids, an incredible wife. I've been able to serve Him faithfully ever since then, some as a school teacher, some as a youth pastor, as a football coach. And I've been able to do things and experience things that I never thought that I would ever get to experience. I've been able to do stuff with my kids that I never had anybody do with me in my life. And you know what? No matter how bad your circumstances are, no matter how bad my circumstances were, and God can take those things and just use them to make a difference in other people's lives. And most importantly, God has been able to use me in my own family's life. As they know, I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes and don't always handle things the proper way. But I think I can say this without hesitation, that they know I love them, and that I don't take for granted a day that I have with them, because I didn't have those with my own family. I never experienced most of these things. As I mentioned, never really knew my dad. My stepdad wasn't in my life for very long, and when it was up and down. Same thing with my mother. And so I've been able to experience those things. I've been able to change my family tree. And you know what? No matter how bad it looks like in your life, the same thing can happen. So I hope this is an encouragement to you. If you feel led, pass this on to other people. Again, I'm here. If you have no one to talk to, I'm here. Just look me up Love to be able to communicate more with you. Thanks again for listening. Hope you have a great day.